Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 313 of your Tick Bootcamp podcast. The title of today's interview is ChroniLyme, an interview with Christèle Dumas-Gonnet. My name is Richard Johannesson.
And I'm Matt Sabatello.
Folks, if you really had any question in your mind about whether or not Lyme disease is an international crisis, you don't have to go any further than this podcast. We have a woman who grew up in Lyon, France, and she was bitten by ticks on a number of different occasions, including during a trip here to the US. She went back and was misdiagnosed despite having concrete evidence before her doctors, which unfortunately prevented her from receiving the treatment she needed for over 2 years.
Rich, what I learned most from this guest is what she did to combat brain fog, her strokes and paralysis, regain her ability to walk, and get energy back in her life. She shares with everybody listening to this podcast episode exactly what she did to regain those parts of her life.
Folks, this story does have a happy ending, and the happy ending is that this woman used her bad experiences to try to help other people. She started ChroniLyme as an advocacy platform on Instagram and has put her in a position where she's testifying regularly before the French Senate. And she started a patient advocacy organization with our good friend, Laura Ornell. So folks, without further ado, I'm really excited to introduce to all of you ChroniLyme. Hi, Christèle Dumas-Gonnet, and welcome to the Tick Bootcamp podcast.
Hi, I'm super excited to be here. I'm super frightened too.
Well, we're really excited to have you here, and hopefully by the end of our conversation together, you'll be less frightened of speaking to the good folks in the Tick Bootcamp community.
I hope so.
So, Christèle, why don't you talk to us a little bit about, your standing in the French Lyme community, and just describe for us a little bit about the work that you're doing with ChroniLyme and the work that you're doing with Preface, the Patient Resource Facilitator Europe.
I created ChroniLyme in 2017, I think. Because I was sick, and I knew I was sick. I was diagnosed just the year before, and I discovered that in France and in many countries, the Lyme doctors who pretend to heal, to cure Lyme disease, were attacked in France. So they were the day I stopped working. There was a note from the medical council. Medical council is a disciplinary chamber for the doctors, and it was just the very day I fall down, and that note was saying the Lyme doctors who pretend to treat Lyme disease are charlatans, and also chronic Lyme disease doesn't exist. So I was just destroyed. So I was sick. It was complicated. I had a doctor. And my doctor was in danger to be attacked, to be suspended. You're not anymore a doctor. In France, it's just like that. So I had two choices: stay in my bed and do nothing and hope for I don't know what. But I think I'm not like that. I'm a hyperactive person, I think. So I was in my bed, but I decided to create an organization called ChroniLyme, and I co-created it with my husband Bertrand, who is a very important person to me. And we decided to defend the doctors and to go to the National Assembly, with the MPs in France, in Paris, and to see and contact the senators, because I had made some studies in politics, so it was my little object of interest, and my husband was working for the government years ago, so it was just the only thing we knew, that we could do a little thing, go to the MPs and the senators and tell them it was a huge crisis.
So, Christèle, let's build this out a little bit so that the folks understand the context in which you're working in. So, on the day that you're diagnosed with Lyme disease, or around the time that you're diagnosed with Lyme disease, you discover that the doctor who was helping you, the first doctor, and we're going to build this out together, but the first doctor who was helping you treat your Lyme disease was under attack.
Yeah.
And he was called a charlatan, and he was accused of diagnosing with a disease, chronic Lyme disease, something that did not exist. And you were brought into, you were triggered into action, you and your husband, to create an organization to protect people like the good doctor who finally diagnosed you. And we're going to talk about this in a minute, after many years of being misdiagnosed.
Yeah, that's it.
So let's, before we move forward, let's talk a little bit about Lyme disease in France, because although the position clearly is chronic Lyme disease does not exist, how many people are currently suffering from chronic Lyme disease in France, and how many people are being diagnosed with chronic Lyme disease each year in France?
Well, we don't have the right numbers. The patient associations think that there are 300,000 people with severe Lyme, with a chronic Lyme and severe Lyme, severe form of the sickness. But I think there is more because it's just the people diagnosed or whatever. But I think there are a lot of people who don't know what they have, just like fibromyalgia and so on, EM, SFC. Yeah, I don't know the right word in English, but the government just says that we have 60,000 new cases per year. It means that it's the people with a red mark or with positive tests, or the two of them. But if you just look at the situation, there is a lack of people. I think it's much more than that, of course.
So your patient organizations believe that it's approximately at least 300,000 people in France that are suffering from chronic Lyme disease, and that there are 60,000 new diagnoses, at least people who have a bullseye rash. And of course, those people disappear because there is no chronic Lyme disease in France, right?
Yeah, yeah. They have, or they don't have antibiotics, and then it's okay. They're cured. That's the doctors who say that.
So, Christèle, it's always important for us to speak with folks in the international community, because even here in the US, where we have an epidemic of Lyme disease, there are folks who believe that there is no chronic Lyme disease. And there are folks in certain regions of the US who believe that Lyme disease is just an East Coast disease, not a national disease. And it's important for our folks to hear from voices like yours, where in France you have a crisis as well, and unfortunately your government is dealing with or establishing official policy very much like the way the US had traditionally established its official policy, where they are denying that people are chronically ill, and they're denying that this disease can go from an acute phase to a chronic phase.
The denial is the same in France, and it's funny because it's the same thing in France. They think that Lyme disease is in the east of the country, so maybe it's the east. That's a problem. That's a big deal. I don't know, but it isn't true, because we have patients, unfortunately, in the whole country, and in Brittany, and in the west of France, and. We have, we don't have an endemic area more than another, I think, now. Even if the east is much worse.
So let's now talk about you and your background and your experiences before you were diagnosed with Lyme disease. So you're currently living in a city in Lyon, France. But you grew up in the more rural, or in the countryside of France. So talk to us about where you grew up and what your experience was like as a child growing up in the French countryside.
I was born and raised in Lyon. It's the second city, the second big city in France. But I was raised in the countryside. And with a garden, with the forest, and with the grass all over. and I was riding horses because my father was fond of horses. So he offered me a horse for my sixth birthday, I think. So I was always outside doing riding bicycle, riding horses, playing Indians and cowboys. I was really an outside child. So
Christèle, one of the things we've learned on this podcast is that people who spend a lot of time outside are more likely to come in contact with ticks. But even more importantly, people who have contact with companion animals like dogs and cats and horses are more likely to come in contact with ticks. So when you were a child and you were spending time in the countryside and you were riding horses and you were an equestrian athlete, were you trained on how to protect yourself from coming in contact with ticks and tick diseases?
Absolutely not. I wasn't aware, and my parents neither, of tick bites. I remember having tick bites and ticks on the horses, not on the cats, I think, but because I did have cats too. But we weren't aware at all of the problem. I didn't even knew the name of Lyme disease. I think I learned that word when I was 35 years old. I met a guy who had Lyme disease, and I said, "What is that?"
So you said that you were bitten by ticks on a number of occasions during your youth. What did you do when you found a tick on you? How did you remove it, and what steps did you take after you had a tick removed from you?
I think we use alcohol, and that's all. You would just pinch it and put it away. That wasn't a big deal. I absolutely don't remember being scared of having a referred protocol or so on.
On how many different occasions do you remember having found ticks biting you on your body prior to your Lyme diagnosis?
Well, in my history, doctors assumed that I had at least 3 tick bites. So maybe when I was young with my horses, and because I don't remember, I got to be sick at when I was 22 years old. But then I went in your country, in Connecticut, with an RV, just like Laura. It's the same story. So it's so funny. But it's not funny. And
So let's pause there for a second. So one of the person you're referencing is Lauren Arnell, who is one of our past French guests, and who is a well-known Lyme author and an activist in France and in Germany, and she is actually a co-creator with you of Preface, which is the Patient Resource Facilitator Europe, correct?
Absolutely, and she's a friend of mine. Yeah, we work together, and the funny thing is that we have the same story, because I went to Old Lyme, with my LV and my brother and my.
And why did you come to Connecticut?
I don't know, just an inspiration. I camped around Old Lyme, and we went. Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts, and we were camping in the nature. And
how old were you then, Christèle, when you came to Connecticut?
Near Old Lyme, because I after that, years later, I looked at the photos. It was in 2003, and I looked at the photos, and we were just close to Old Lyme.
So when you came to the US in 2003 and you were camping outside, do you remember having been bitten by ticks?
No, absolutely not. But I came back very sick, very, very sick, just like the story Laura wrote in her book. I was in a white fog I had a fever. I was dazzling. I was completely exhausted. And when I came back to France, I stayed in my bed during 2 weeks, I remember. And then I didn't recover. So I suppose there was something. And after that, we suppose that I had a tick bite, because it was the only explanation to this sickness. And the third time, it was in 2008.
2008, yes.
Yeah, and it was in Beaujolais. You know Beaujolais, the wine. It's an area near Lyon. It's famous for its wine, red wine. And I had a rash this time, so I went to the chemist and said, "What is that?" I had fever. I wasn't feeling well, and the chemist told me it's a spider bite. So don't do anything. Just here's a cream for a spider bite, and it's okay. So I didn't do anything, and 1 year later, 1 year or two, I had the first TIA, transient ischemic attack.
Yeah, so let's pause there for a second, and let's talk a little bit about what you were doing at the time that you had gotten sick. So you said that you began to get sick, chronically sick, when you were 22 years old, which is at the end of your college career, correct?
Yeah, I was studying politics at this time.
Okay.
And I was hyperactive before that. I was doing a lot of sports. I was healthy, I think, and I have a lot of energy. So suddenly, after I had 3 surgeries in a row, in 1 year, for the ankle, because I had an accident, and I didn't recover after the surgeries. Just like it was bad for me, or so it became difficult in my studies. I had to stop for 2 months studying, and it was kind of difficult. But day after day, I recover a little, and then I got pregnant, because I got pregnant when I was 23, yeah. And I had 2 pregnancies in 1998 and 2000. And I didn't recover after the pregnancies. It was so difficult for me. I was weak. My arms were weak. My body was weak. And I had a pain all over the body, and it was unexplainable. So I decided to. That's the moment I began my journey, to the doctors. I think I
So,
saw
Christèle,
a lot of doctors.
There was one other issue that I did want to talk with you about, which is so you had a series of different immunocompromising events. So you had the surgeries that were immunocompromising, and then I also understand that you had a vaccination for hepatitis. Talk to us about the vaccination and what impact that had on your health decline.
Yeah, you're right. I forgot it. Yeah, the very beginning of the sickness for me was the B hepatitis. Yeah, vaccination. You're right. I wasn't the same after that. I never be the same after that. You can't say now I'm healthy. I'm always super active and hyperactive, but I'm 50% of what I was before. I was never tired before that, and that was the beginning. Yeah, to be hepatitis.
So, Christèle, you've had a couple of things that you just outlined for us. So you had at least 3 separate occasions when you're bitten by a tick. the tick bite that you suffered in Connecticut caused you to be physically ill for several weeks. You also had a tick bite when you were in wine country in the France, which also caused you to have a bullseye rash, which you said it was a chemist. Here in the US, we would call it a pharmacist, gave you a cream and told you that it was a spider bite rather than, unfortunately, a doctor diagnosing it with Lyme disease. And then you had a series of immunocompromising events. You had an ankle injury that required 3 surgeries, and you had a reaction to the hepatitis B shot. Now, all of this comes together for you, and now you become chronically ill. You went from being a hardworking student and athlete who has now become chronically ill over a very short period of time. Now, you began to talk to us about now your TIA. So can you talk to us about your headaches and now ultimately how you're going from having symptomatic headaches to now having a seizure?
Yeah, the first time I think it was it was in 2010, just 2 years, 1 or 2 years after the tick bite. And then it was terrifying because I thought I was going to die because I had a paralysis, left side paralysis, and my brain didn't work anymore. You know, just like a bug, but a very long bug. And I got to the hospital in emergency, but they didn't find anything. But after that, it came back, and I had a lot of incidents like that. And one day I did a MRI, a brain MRI, and they saw white matter signals, you know, lesions on the brain, a lot of them, and one was on the left ventricle. So they were hesitating with MS, multiple sclerosis, and hesitating with migraines, which is the same thing, but that's the thing. Lyme disease diagnosis is very weird because you hesitate with such different things.
So, Christèle, you were having a long series of neurological symptoms between the time that you first had your early experiences and then the time when you were diagnosed with Lyme disease. And your journey between your first symptoms and your diagnosis was how many years?
I was 22 years old for the first symptoms, and I was diagnosed. I was 42, so 20 years.
So you had 20 years of progressing neurological symptoms between the time that you had your first symptoms and the time that you had ultimately been diagnosed. Now, how many doctors did you see in that 20-year window between your first symptoms and then your diagnosis?
I really don't know. I think I don't know, 100 doctors. I think because I went to so many doctors, maybe 100.
And I understand you had collected your medical records and you had over 500 pages of medical records with different diagnoses during that 20-year period.
Yeah, as all the Lyme patients, I have a very huge file, and you know, when you go to the doctor with your file, you're out able to lift it, you know, to carry it. So that's kind of funny. But the thing is, in 2014. I had a TIA, transient ischemic attack, a big one, a very big one. I went to the hospital in emergency, and in the room with when you choke somebody who is dying, all the guys were dying just around me. It was horrible. When you choke the person with the hurt,
Yes.
I don't know the right word, but so it was scaring. And I just had the MRI. I knew I had some lesions in the brain, but my appointment with the neurologist wasn't. It was after that, so I didn't go yet to the neurologist. And I went in a neurologic hospital. It's a big one. It's a big hospital. It's a big French hospital. And they did a spinal tap, it was horrible, by the way, because I couldn't move by a fortnight. I couldn't, because I had a post-syndrome spinal tap. I don't know what it is called.
Okay.
And all my tests, my blood tests, my spinal tap were positive. It was written in my file, neuroborreliosis, positive.
Okay, so let's pause there for a second. So in 2014, you go for a spinal tap after a TIA, and the doctors, or at least the medical records, indicate that you are positive for Lyme disease, and they diagnose you with neuroborreliosis, right?
Neurolyme.
Neurolyme. So before we get there, and this is it, I know this is a very, very important part of your story, but I want you to pause there and let's look backward now to the 20 years, or I guess at that time it was probably about 17 years or 18 years of treatment. How many different diagnoses did you get from the 100 doctors that you had seen in the 18-year period prior to the spinal tap?
The major diagnosis I got was fibromyalgia. So this isn't a diagnosis because it doesn't mean anything. It's a syndrome. So, and it's said that it's in the head. Nobody accused me of not being sick or that was in my head, but I understood that that diagnosis was nothing. It couldn't help me, so I chose to ignore it. I knew it wasn't that.
So I think there's two different ways of looking at fibromyalgia. I think one way of looking at fibromyalgia is to essentially serve as a diagnosis that convicts the medical community of failure, right? They believe you have symptoms, but they don't know why you have the symptoms. So they're just essentially confessing that they have failed and they don't know what's wrong with you, right?
An easy diagnosis, I should say.
Right. Or another way of looking at fibromyalgia is that what they're saying is you have symptoms, but they're in your head, right? It's a disorder, not a disease. There's no connection between your symptoms and any process in your body. So one way or the other, it's either, hey, we failed and there's nothing we can do for you, or there's really nothing wrong with you. You're just symptomatic without any real basis of your symptoms.
I was in the first case because I was taking care of my children alone because I divorced in 2002, and I was working a lot, and I had great positions, in a healthcare, and I think. So I was working in a healthcare system, So doctors wouldn't tell me you're not sick, it's in your head. Nobody never told me that. So it's the first case. They said we can't do anything for you, and I remember, rheumatologist, rheumatologist. Who told me you have fibromyalgia and you're going to be horrible and your husband is going to leave you one day. So I remember I was crying just after that. He didn't say it was in my head, but he said I was going to become somebody very naughty, ugly, and terrible. So it was difficult.
Yeah, and that doctor really needs to get a couple of slaps after saying something so rude. But that's I guess we can pivot off of beating up doctors for a moment and now talk about 2014. So in 2014, a little bit, I guess maybe we're going to beat up doctors a little bit more now. In 2014, you have a seizure, you have an MRI, you go for a very painful procedure where you have a spinal tap. The spinal tap then is the fluids are analyzed, and when the fluids are analyzed, you have a diagnosis of neurological Lyme, but no one tells you.
No. Guess what? They didn't. They didn't tell me I had neuroLyme, and they didn't think I had neuroLyme, even if the lab would write it. It's written because I got the file. I got the medical file 2 years later. Sorry, because I asked for my medical file. In France, there is a law. You can ask for your medical file, and you should have it. So 2 years later, I was dying of Lyme disease, really dying. I lost 25 pounds. I lost my hair. I was dying, and I had a dozen TIA after that.
Okay, so let's pause here for a second again. So we have a positive test in 2014, which is never provided to you. So in 2014, when you had the seizure and you had all of the tests, did you leave the hospital with a diagnosis? Did they diagnose you with something, or you left without any diagnosis at all?
Absolutely not. I didn't have a diagnosis. They just told me I had some migraine, atypical migraine, neurological migraine, and that's all.
So you were diagnosed with a migraine condition, a neurological migraine or headache condition. And now you spent 2 years between 2014 and 2016 suffering from neurological Lyme disease. And you just described it as you were dying, right? You were getting sicker and sicker, and you were to the point where your hair had fallen out, you were unable to work, you were having seizure after seizure after seizure, but you hadn't been treating the Lyme disease because despite the Lyme bacteria being discovered when they tested the spinal fluids, that information was never given to you, and you were never given any treatment.
No, I didn't have any treatment. I had the MRI, which was positive with numerous white matter signals. I had anosmia. It's during 3 years. I had anosmia. I couldn't smell anything, just like in long COVID. It's very interesting, by the way. And it's in the literature that in your Lyme you could have anosmia. So I had anosmia. The MRI. I had the paralysis. At that time, it was transient. I wasn't paralyzed for a long time.
So you had transient paralysis where you were paralyzed sometimes, and then you would regain function, and then you'd have another seizure and become paralyzed for some time, and then you'd regain regain your faculties.
That's not the way it is now, because we will discuss it later. But now I had an hemiplegia, and then I'm disabled now.
Okay, so Matt's going to talk with you about that in a minute. Let's talk about what was happening between 2014 and 2016, because this is really outrageous, where your body was being attacked, your health was declining, you weren't getting any care at all for that 2-year period of time, but the test that you took in 2014 definitively demonstrated that you had Lyme disease. You had neurological Lyme disease.
Yeah, it was NeuroLyme for the beginners, said my doctor. It was a NeuroLyme, very simple to diagnose. So in that 2 years, I declined progressively. It was very difficult period. That's the time I met my husband. I met my husband in 2012, something like that. So he was there, and I thank him a lot because he was helping me with the work, with the children. I went working. I remember it was 20 minutes to go to work by car, and I was making a pause in the middle of the trip to sleep in my car. And during the lunch, I wouldn't eat. I would sleep in my car too, even after winter, because I was too tired. I couldn't. And the thing I want to say is the denial of Lyme disease is our denial, because I'm a hyperactive woman. I'm very strong. So if you are told that you are not sick, really, so you don't believe it. You believe you're not sick, and you just act the way you act. You continue to work and to do something, and that's a huge error, a huge mistake I made.
So Christèle, let's focus on that for a second. I want you to put now on your political scientist hat. You studied political science in college, and then you worked in a number of important governmental positions, including in healthcare in France. Mm-hmm. Let's first focus on the official governmental policy in France at the time that you had enough information, or your doctors had enough information to diagnose you with neuroLyme, but refused to do that. Do you believe that in 2014, the reason the doctors didn't diagnose you with Lyme disease is because there was an official government policy that Lyme disease did not exist, and that doctors were afraid to give you the diagnosis that you actually had from the spinal tap?
It's a very interesting question, and I asked myself that because it's very interesting question. In 2006, we had in France, we call it a consensus. It's just like a law, a medical law, and it was saying something of on Lyme disease. Then chronic Lyme doesn't exist, okay, but you have to get antibiotics with a Lyme disease on the beginning, and it was written. And my condition, neuroLyme, with lesion on MRI, anosmia, and so on, it was written on this consensus, on this medical law. But when you don't want to look for something, you don't find it. So I think it was more than an ambience, an atmosphere in the medical staff, not to look for Lyme disease.
Okay, so let's stop there for a second. So on the macro, we have the politicization of healthcare, where there's a government policy that a particular disease does not exist, and because you have an official government policy that a disease does not exist, your feeling is that the healthcare workers are not looking for something that they're told doesn't exist.
But that is just under their eyes.
Okay.
And so in the medical law, if you just follow it, I would have been treated. It's a mistake. And they told me it was a mistake years later.
Okay.
But it was too late.
So you're saying that, So what I don't understand is you're arguing here, and so I want to challenge you on this. You're arguing that because there was an official policy that it didn't exist, they were not looking for it. But if they were not looking for it, how did they find it and put it in your medical records if it was something they weren't looking for? Because I think there's a difference between not looking for something and not seeing something that's there and not treating it.
I think it's incompetence. Yeah.
Incompetence.
Incompetence. I think it's incompetence.
On the part of your doctors or on the part of the government? Because I do want to get to the second point you were making. And the second point you were making is because you were not told about your diagnosis and you were told there's nothing wrong with you, in your own head, you didn't believe it. So I think there's a connection between a government politicizing or making political healthcare decisions, which then put us in a position where we're not given the information, or then puts us in a position where we ourselves do not even believe it exists. So when a government policy says something that doesn't exist, it puts us in a position where we don't think it exists in our own mind.
I think they don't have a lot of answers to Lyme disease, and even if in 2014 they didn't have answers, and it was easier. It wasn't a mistake because they told me it was a mistake years later, but I don't think it was a mistake. And I said that it was an idea. You know, they were narrow-minded because in the political, in the policy, in the governmental policy, I had neuroLyme, so it was some incompetence. It was. I don't really know.
I mean, of course, we're never going to know why it was in your chart and you weren't treated for it, right? We don't know that. But there are a number of different factors that we can identify, some of it which is the policy of the French government at the time. Part of it is the policies that the healthcare workers were following. And part of it was the culture that you were working in, because you weren't permitted to be an informed patient. You weren't partnering with your doctors because your doctors weren't inviting you to be a partner. So you didn't even have your medical records for another 2 years. And no. Let's look at this. You're an educated woman who is working in the healthcare field in the very government that is now establishing this policy. So it's not like you weren't a capable person, but you are not permitted to be a partner in your treatment.
Maybe the doctor I saw, the neurologist I saw, was really incompetent. That's I'm going to tell you a story just after that. But imagine in France, the doctors were told that Lyme disease is rare, very rare, you know, but rare. But no, it's not a Fields Medal, you know, because sometimes when a sickness is rare, you are a brave doctor, you know, to diagnose it, and you're higher than the others, right. But not with Lyme disease.
Right. So you can gain status in the medical community by finding a unique diagnosis in most cases, but with Lyme disease, because it's been politicized, you actually are afraid to make this diagnosis, which in most cases should cause your status to rise because you've made a special diagnosis.
Yeah. I think that's it. But so the funny story, but it's not very story. It's not very funny. Sorry. 2 years later, when I was really dying, and I met that doctor, she became a friend. She is a she, and she saved my life. Really, she took my file with the 500 pages. And she said, go and get your file at the hospital because I need the file. I need to understand what was in the spinal tap and so on. So I called the administration of the hospital, and you know, you have this law. You can get your medical file. So I asked for my file. And then I waited for some days, and I got a call, a very strange call, a phone call. I was at my pharmacist, so it was just he was with me when I got this phone call. It was my neurologist, the neurologist I had in in 2014.
Yes.
And she was saying, "Hello, how are you? I know you asked for your medical file." Yes, I did. Well, you're not ill, you know. You're not sick. You don't have Lyme disease, so it's not used to get your file. I said, yes, I want my file. I'm sorry, but I know I had neuroLyme because I have a doctor who told me that. So I just want my file. No, no, you don't have a... Well, it took 1 or 2 minutes, and then she understood. I wouldn't go away, and I would get my medical file, and it's the law. So she changed the tone, absolutely changed the tone of the conversation. And she said, yes, okay, you got neuroLyme. Yeah, you have neuroLyme. And you have to go to the hospital quickly to take antibiotics. I said, what? No, no, but that's okay. I don't go to the hospital. I have my doctor. And yes, but you have to go to the hospital. You know, she changed her mind because she knew she had made a mistake. And I think it's not a mistake. I think, just like you said, it's a culture. It's a narrow-minded culture, you know. And it was absolutely weird. And the pharmacist was just with the mouth, wow, it's impossible, because he got Lyme disease too. So he was interested in my case. And the neurologist, I think she is definitely an incompetent person, competent doctor. But she's not alone. She's not alone.
Christèle, I have to question again. I know we're kind of really focusing on this topic, but was she wrong, or was there something else there? Because you had 100% definitive neurological Lyme disease from your spinal tap. You then ask for your records. She challenges you and says, you don't need your medical records. You're not sick. You're fine. And then the more you push her, she says, okay, fine, I'll give you your records, but you are really sick. You have chronic Lyme. Go to the hospital to get antibiotics. So you're going from you're fine to this is an emergency, go to the hospital. So I don't know that she was wrong. There seems to be something deeper here, like this whole recognition of chronic Lyme. And frankly, my opinion is she didn't want to deal with it. Many doctors here in the United States, when Lyme comes up, especially late stage or chronic Lyme, they don't want anything to do with it because it's so controversial, right? So do you think that that was part of what was going on with your neurologist, is she didn't want to be bothered by you or your illness because you had this controversial disease?
I'm not sure, because in 2014 it wasn't as controversial as 2 years later, because in July in 2016 in France we had a call from 100 doctors, 100 Lyme doctors, in a very huge newspaper. And it was the really beginning of the great polemic, the great controversial of Lyme disease. But 2 years before, I'm not sure. I think, you know, this neurologist, I met her the first time 2 years ago in 2012 when I had a TIA. And she wouldn't propose to me an MRI. And I think she was wrong. So I think she was incompetent.
She was very wrong. I mean, you're having mini strokes, right? TIAs are mini strokes, and she refuses to do an MRI to see what's going on and why you're having them. And then she denies your chronic Lyme disease when you have chronic Lyme based on your spinal tap, which is a definitive diagnosis. So I know we're focusing on this. It's just very frustrating to hear this. And I'm sorry, Christèle, that you've had to go through this and get your treatment and diagnosis delayed so much. But let's focus on your ultimate diagnosis. You now demand your records. You get your records. What doctor are you treating with? And what is your plan moving forward once you realize I have neurological Lyme disease?
So I met that doctor. She is a Lyme doctor. They don't want to be called like that, but that's the only the only way to call them, because they were treating Lyme disease despite the policy, the government policy. They wanted to cure people. So I met her by coincidence. if you do believe in coincidences or if you do believe in something else. She met my husband, and my husband was questioning everybody. My wife is dying. She's really, really sick. And he was telling to all the people he was meeting. And then he met that doctor, and he put the story on the table. And the doctor said, did she have a tick bite? It's just like that, you know, and she just shows the rash to my husband. And so we came back to the house. Honey, did you have a rash just like that? Oh yes, it was my spider tick bite. It was a spider bite. It was just like that. Then I realized that the spider bite was a tick bite, and then maybe I could be sick for years because of that. It's later that we would think of the old Lyme journey, the old Lyme trip, you know, to Connecticut. I would rebuild the story, the whole story, because it's just like you said 5 minutes ago, I was educated, I'm able to understand. It was just, I didn't get my story. I had to rebuild the story, you know, just like they lied to you for years. It was very strange. So that doctor, so she got my blood test. I made other blood tests. All were highly positive, and they're always highly positive. I'm a very positive woman, even in the blood samples. And she got the record with the spinal tap, and she said, "You are in high, very great danger." So I think I began the Rocephin, you say?
Correct. Yep. IV Rocephin, the antibiotic.
IV Rocephin. Yep. I began the IV Rocephin the day after. She wouldn't wait for a long time, because you know, when you make mini strokes, you have the risk of getting a real stroke in the 3 days after. So she wouldn't take the risk. So I began antiparasitic and so on, and antibiotics, IV Rocephin, azithromycin, and so on. And at the beginning, she told me, well, it's 6 months, you know, 6 months of antibiotics. I think you'll get better. But it was way more difficult than that, because I waited too long. And the message to the people who are listening to us, you shouldn't wait, because I waited too long. I was in denial. The doctors were in denial. It was too long. After a long time, a lot of symptoms can be resolvent. Yeah, can be resolvent.
Resolved. Yeah, a lot of symptoms can get better and be resolved.
Yeah, can get better, but you can't wait too long.
And in your case, Christèle, it was about 20 years from the time you were 22 to the time you were 42, I believe, for your diagnosis, correct?
Yeah.
So, I mean, walk us through the testing. I find it interesting that your Lyme doctor ran blood work even though you had a positive Lyme test from a spinal tap, because a spinal tap diagnosis in many cases would be enough to initiate treatment by a Lyme literate doctor. So did your doctor also look for co-infections in addition to Lyme disease when you were tested?
Yeah, she was looking for co-infections. And the funny thing too, even if it's not funny at all, in my spinal tap, in France, you have a protocol, a very stupid protocol. You know, you have ELISA test, and you have Western blot test. In France, you should have a positive ELISA test to get a Western blot test. You can't have a Western blot test in primary intention. Okay, so in the spinal tap, they had just made ELISA test. So my doctor would And it's not in the consensus of 2006. Second mistake, because they didn't apply the protocol, you know. So it was really, really zero.
So, Christèle, are you saying that because they didn't do an ELISA test first before the spinal tap wasn't officially recognized? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, she would look for co-infections, right? But you know, it was a mistake of the hospital, because we will see it later. But now, when I go to the hospital, they don't treat me at all. But it's written NeuroLyme on my file at the hospital, because the professor told me, yes, we made a mistake. We should have treated you.
So the mistake was they should have treated you and recognized it, but because they didn't do the screening process before the spinal tap, it wasn't recognized, even though it's a very definitive test, the spinal tap. So they wanted you to do the ELISA test first, correct?
Yeah.
And, you know, here in the States, when it comes to the blood test side of things, it used to be where you would only get an ELISA test first. And then if you were positive for the screening, the ELISA, then you would have a Western blot. That's changed here in the States, where most doctors will now do a Western blot. But some doctors still follow that outdated model, which I think you suffered from as well, unfortunately, throughout your journey. So, Christèle, talk to us more about the treatment, right? Your doctor tells you, she says to you, hey, within 6 months, I think I can get you better. You go on IV antibiotics, Rocephin, and you also mentioned antiparasitics as well. So what antiparasitics were you on? If you could just give us an idea of what medication specifically you were taking during the first 6 months you were treating chronic Lyme disease.
In fact, she treated me for 2 years without therapeutic window, as we call it in France. I don't know if it's the same word in English, because at each time she would stop the antibiotics for 4 or 5 days. I was falling down again very, very quickly. So I had a lot of Alzheimer reactions, but the moment she would stop antibiotics in the first 2 years, I was having TAA, mini strokes again. It was a battle with time, you know, during this moment.
So the antibiotics were stopping the mini strokes.
Yeah.
But when you go off the antibiotics, they'd come right back.
Yeah, absolutely. It was right clear.
So I'm taking that as the antibiotics were suppressing Lyme and other bacterial infections possibly that were causing the mini strokes. And as soon as you stopped, that bacterial infection would come back up and cause the mini strokes again. Is that what you think was happening?
Yeah, I don't really know what happened. We were looking for nowadays what is going on in the brain and so on. I think IV Rocephin is the antibiotic that is the best for me, because I could think clearly again. I could talk because I wouldn't speak English. I'm not very good at English, but at that time I wasn't able to speak English, nor French. It was complicated. I was looking for my words. I couldn't speak because I was too tired to speak. You know, I think you know that sensation, that feeling.
Yes.
You're too tired to speak.
But you were not able to speak French or English, and you were having constant strokes, but the IV Rocephin gave you the ability to think, speak, and not have these mini strokes, right? Which is really powerful. And I want to just highlight that here you are on an American English podcast sharing your story, and you're speaking English very well. I mean, you're explaining these things very well. So to hear that you couldn't speak your native language, French, never mind English, and here you are today is just such a cool transformation that Rich is going to get to, but that made me a little excited. I wanted to share that with you and the audience to just say how happy I am to see the progress you've made here, Christèle, since you first got sick and diagnosed. But walk us through more of this 2-year window. So what else, you talked about the IV Rocephin and the antibiotics. What were these antiparasitics you were taking? Were you doing any herbs? And what else were you doing throughout this 2-year window to treat Lyme in addition to the antibiotics?
I think I tasted all the methods. I think the only method I didn't test is bioresonance, but I had so many different antibiotics. To thank you for the compliment in English, but I had 6 months of IV Rocephin to be able to speak to you. It wasn't 6 months in a row. It was month by month. So it's been 6 years. Yeah, I've been diagnosed. So I had, I think, 1 month per year to be able to speak.
Christèle, I'm sorry to interrupt, but before you go on about the other things, I just want to clarify that with the antibiotics. So at first you were on antibiotics for a consecutive period of time when you first got diagnosed 6 years ago. Is that correct? It's like 6 months straight, or was it always 1 month and then nothing and then 1 month?
No. It was 1 month of Rocephin, and then I took Bactrim, I took azithromycin, I took cefuroxime. I don't know, Doxy. You have Doxy?
Doxycycline, Rocephin,
okay.
Ceftriaxone. Yep, is that? And I think you said Artemisia. Is that the herb? I believe that's sweet wormwood. Is that what you're saying?
No, azithromycin is an antibiotic.
Okay.
Zithromax maybe.
Oh, Zithromax. Yes.
Okay.
Gotcha.
No, the two first years, I got antibiotics without pause, because as I said, each time the doctor were making a pause, I was declining. So she wouldn't she wouldn't try to pause a long time. So I would go antibiotic again. After 2 years of antiparasitics, antifungals, antibiotics, and so on, I was better. But it was in 2018. I was declared by the government on, how do you say, disabled?
Disability. Yep. Disabled.
Disability.
Yep.
And I didn't choose that because, I had great jobs. I loved my job. Didn't want to be disabled, like in disability. I didn't want. So it was very, how do you say, very brutal, very harsh. One summer in 2018, it's been 9 months. I wouldn't work, just 9 months, and because I was very sick. And they would give me an appointment. You go, okay. So I come to the doctor of the it's an official legal doctor, of the government. And he said, "You're too sick. We stop now." I said, "We stop what?" "You stop. You are not able to work anymore. So you're 44 years old. And you have 2 great children. Well, you just stop, okay? So you go to the social worker. You go out to the office and you go to the social worker. She's gonna take care of you and your papers and so on. And I was in charge in my job of hundreds of people, and I would send them to the social worker, sometimes. But that time it was me. Go to the social worker, and then you're nothing. You don't work anymore. So it was so harsh. The very evening, I had a mini stroke, a great one, a huge one, because it was so difficult. You can't say people. You can't say people things just that way. So it's brutal in the whole scale, in the healthcare system, in the government, in the legal system. So that was it. 44 years old, I wouldn't work again. So
I'm so sorry, Christèle, but the good news is you were getting a little bit better, right? You were making some progress with the antibiotics. And after being on the Rocephin, followed up by all the other antibiotics and being on the antiparasitics, it sounds like when that kind of subsided after that first 2-year window, you now do 1 month of IV Rocephin every year. Is that what you said earlier, Christèle?
yeah, almost. Yeah, approximately.
And does that keep you feeling good enough? Is that just sort of like a boost to keep you quite, at the, feeling good so you don't backslide and get worse? Is that why you're doing that?
I do that because of the paralysis. Because we are in 2016, so I take IV Rocephin and antibiotics, antiparasitics, antifungals. Then we are in 2017, and the 26th of October 2017, I fall down at office. Really, killed at the battle. That's it. I wouldn't see the board. I was presenting some financial sheets. I don't remember what, and I wouldn't be able to look at the board. I wouldn't see anything. I had a blurred vision. I wasn't hearing people anymore. I couldn't hear, and I had the lumbago, so huge. I was just like that at the office, and then I took my car and I went to a meeting.
You drove after that?
I drove because denial. I drove after that.
So you let it come back and then you got in the car and left.
No, yeah. The problem is I had when you have passengers on the road, I would kill them. I was very afraid of that because this time it was too much for me, too much. So I went to the meeting. I was very frightened because I had those people I could kill with my car, and then I lose my car. I didn't know where it was parked. I didn't recognize the people at the meeting. I was so I called my husband and I said, "It's the end. I can't do anymore. I should have killed people with the car, and I don't know where is my car." And I was crying. And the doctor would say every month you have to stop working. You have to stop working because you have IV Rocephin, you have antibiotics. You should stop working because it's too much for you. But I was in denial, so it was complicated. But that very day, I called my husband and I said, "It's the end. I should have. I could have killed somebody." And my husband said, "So that's the reason you want to stop working? Just other people, but not you?" He was horrified. But that was the case. I accepted to stop working because to not killing people, other people.
Christèle, you went to work, you were doing a presentation, you lost your vision, you couldn't hear, and you fell. So basically you couldn't see, you couldn't hear, and your legs gave out and you fell. Then you were driving and it was so bad that you thought you would have hit people and killed people because you were just so sick and impaired, you couldn't drive. And those two events together led you to say, "I can't do this anymore." It sounds like that was your crash to say, "I can't work anymore," correct?
Yeah, I think it's like a burnout.
Burnout, yes.
It's like a burnout caused by the sickness, but it's like a burnout. I couldn't do anymore. So this was the 22nd of October 2017, the day the council, the medical council said Lyme doctors are charlatans and chronic Lyme doesn't exist. I remember that day because it was weird. It was the same day.
So the same day you burnt out and crashed
Yeah.
from chronic Lyme disease, your government was saying chronic Lyme disease is not real.
Yeah. So I came back house. So I came back house. So you don't work. You know why I didn't want to stop working, because I absolutely knew in my mind I wouldn't work again. I knew that. So it was scaring. So I wouldn't stop because I didn't know what was behind. What is in the hole, and was the longer of the hole, you don't know. So it was the day France said chronic Lyme doesn't exist. So as I am an activist, I think I used to volunteer in a ONG for women's rights at the UN before Lyme disease. So I am an activist in the soul, in the mind. So that day, I decided to do something. I didn't know exactly what. I had to think about it, and it was so difficult for me to think. But I was lucky because I had my husband with me. So we thought together what could be done for my doctor, for instance, to protect her, to protect the other guys who were heroes, to get healing people and being attacked by the government. You know, in France, there were 100 in 2016. You know how many are there today? I think there are 10 doctors treating Lyme disease. They're retired, or they have been suspended, or they're frightened, they've been scared by the menace, you know. So I think 10 of them treat Lyme disease.
So you went from hundreds of doctors that specialized in Lyme and treated Lyme disease to maybe 10 all throughout France because of the government's declaration that chronic Lyme isn't real, and doctors were afraid to treat it, even though many know it is real. You now use this opportunity when you're no longer able to work to start to help influence change in France, to bring awareness and education and correct this problem with your government, right? Now, Rich is going to jump in after this question and talk to you about the work you're doing with your husband and ChroniLyme and everything else to, do this groundbreaking, amazing work you're doing that we are just so happy that you did over there in France. And I can't tell you, that's how we met you, right? I mean, through Laura Arnal, and now we met you, Christèle. So we can't thank you enough for all the work that you're doing. But I just want to ask you before Rich picks up, when you did decide to stop working, what have you done with your health from a treatment standpoint since then? Because it's been about 1 or 2 years, right, since it's happened. What have you done health-wise to treat? Are you just doing the antibiotics for 1 month every year on and off? Are you doing anything else to try to improve your health? Just give us an idea of what you're doing in that regard from a treatment side. And then Rich is going to jump in and talk to you about ChroniLyme and all the things you're doing to give back and help the community.
I took so many medicines. I'm always on treatment. I'm not cured nowadays, so I'm still sick. So I took a lot of Malaron. I tried to be healed by Dr. Cameron with Laura. The problem is that I went with him almost a year, and my daughter too, because I didn't precise, but my daughter is sick since she was born, certainly Lyme disease or so on. So we went to Dr. Cameron, but the problem is my daughter and I took so many antibiotics that now we can't bear antibiotics more. So my girl has Clostridium, difficile. It's a very bad bacteria in the guts that you got with antibiotics. Too much antibiotics, too many antibiotics. So the problem is today, the IV Rocephin, the last time I got IV Rocephin, it was last year, because I had an hemiplegia in May 2020, and during the lockdown, and I didn't recover. I have a cane for walking, and my left arm is paralyzed. You know, since the and the ivermectin doesn't improve that much now, and my guts are too bad to get antibiotics. So I turned myself to Chinese medicine, which I love so much. It's been a while, but now I do a lot of Chinese medicine every month. With acupuncture, with Chinese herbs. I take Chinese herbs every day. And I do tuina massage. I don't know if you know tuina massage. It's a Chinese, a traditional Chinese massage, which is very interesting because it made the fluids run all over your body again. You know, it's very interesting. And I do take a lot of supplements, vitamin C, D, zinc, magnesium, NAC, I don't know how to say it, probiotics, and so on. I take so many things, and I take too an anti-calcium channel blocker for my blood vessels, because I see a neurologist, another one, not the one at the hospital, and some antiplatelet aggregator. So I do a lot of things to be just like the way I am today.
So now that you're on the maintenance phase of your health program, you're also doing some great work, advocacy work. And I think the really powerful element of your story is that for 20 years you were sick and getting very sick, and you came in contact with a number of incompetent doctors, and nothing happened to them. You finally get a diagnosis, you're treated by a competent doctor, and now that doctor is being threatened by the government, and her license is being threatened by the government because she's doing competent work, right? Which is what inspired you and your husband to begin ChroniLyme. So talk to us about the kind of work that you're doing now that you're in this superhero phase of your existence, where you're taking the training that you had in college, which was in government and politics. You're taking your work experience when you worked in government for several decades, where you were a leader and a supervisor of hundreds of people, to now using your experience and your training and your aptitude to protect doctors who are now treating people with Lyme disease in France.
Yes, I used, I think, an overall expression because even if I was very sick, I had learned to speak, to be a speaker. So this is really important to convince politics. To convince politicians, sorry. So I think this is the thing that motivated me, because I was seeing all the patients, they were sick and not really able to defend themselves, So what we did with Bertrand, and that doctor, because she became a friend and she is in ChroniLyme, she is our doctor, and there is other people too. And we went to the Senate, The Senate,
yes.
Senate, yeah, in Paris. I didn't remember how we got there, but I think it's because we knew, because as you said, I learned in politics how to do network, how to go to the people. Maybe we sent an email. I don't remember, but we knew how to write and to speak, and I think this was the great thing to go there.
Right, so you testified about Lyme disease before the Senate in Paris, and how were you received there? We saw her on Instagram that some of your testimony was put up, and it unfortunately I don't speak French, but it seemed like it was very powerful and very passionate the way you were you were advocating for Lyme disease patients. So talk about what that experience was like and how you were received by the senators who you were testifying before.
It was very good reception. They were highly motivated because, all the people would tell them after shows and speaking, I'm sick, do something for me. But the problem is that the senators didn't understand the problem. When you don't get Lyme disease, when you don't know anything about Lyme disease, you don't understand the problem. You've got diabetes, so you go to a hospital and they treat you. Well, you're not cured, but that's another thing. But that's another problem. But there is no problem. You go to the hospital, so it's very difficult to people and almost politicians to understand what is going on. What's the problem? Why the doctors wouldn't cure, wouldn't treat patients? So we had several goals going there. Explain the problem. Explain with simple words in order to make them understand the problem. And we wanted to build some like a kit, some solutions to give to them. You could do that because all the sick people, the patients say it's horrible. I'm sick. Nobody cures me. Nobody treats me. But what could we do? And that's the question of the politician. What can I do for you? Tell me. So if you haven't anything to tell them, it's no use to go and see them.
Right, and of course, they had to understand the role they were playing in attacking doctors and preventing doctors from diagnosing you, which of course had the impact that you had described earlier, where you started to doubt yourself whether or not you were really sick because you were told by your doctors that you weren't sick, and because your doctors were not allowed to tell you that you were sick, it became this sort of very unhealthy emotional experience for you, all driven by the politics and the politicization of Lyme disease. And that's why it was important for you to go to that source and put them on notice that they were actually hurting people because of their policies.
Yeah, that's exactly that. Giving them tools to act. That's the aim of ChroniLyme, because nobody gives them tools. So what could be done? So we thought about it very, very strongly to write. So we wrote a white book. I don't know if you call that
white paper here in the US. Yes.
White paper. All right. So a white paper with so many pages to explain what could be done with proposition A, proposition B, proposition C. Something in the codes, because patients don't have the codes to talk to politicians, and that's the only thing. We were little. We were 3 or 4 people, but we thought we could just add this with this little competence to explain them with the codes, knowing what could be done. Because when you go to see a politician, what can he do for you? Make a law. So which law? What could you put into the law? That's the thing. So that's the work we've done during the 5 past years. And we went at the National Assembly too, several times, to be auditioned by the politicians. It's a very good thing because they saw us and they saw me. I didn't want to be seen. That wasn't but when I go now with my cane, I'm disabled. It's complicated for me to walk. And it's something because they see me, and then I sit down and I speak and I explain the things, and it's clear for them. You have to see the patient. You have to speak into the heart of people. So
And they have to have an image of the people who are being hurt by the policies that they're establishing. Now, let's talk about the second piece of your work, because you're doing fantastic work with identifying the problems that the government is creating for people who are sick and the challenges that they're facing. And you saw that on your journey, but you saw another thing on your journey. And the other thing that you saw on your journey was that you were not being empowered by your doctors. In fact, in 2014, despite having definitive proof that you were in fact suffering from Lyme, you were not given that information until 2 years later when you saw another doctor. In order to be able to deal with that issue and empowering patients, you connected with the brilliant Laura Nalnal, and you are working with her with a patient empowerment organization. So talk to us about Preface, the Patient Resource Facilitator Europe, and the work that you and Lauren are doing together to empower patients so that the problem that you had in 2014 would not repeat itself in your country.
And that's why I told to the hospital, don't do that to people again. Because I'm resilient, but everybody, not all the people are resilient. And even if you are, you don't deserve that. So when I went to the National Assembly, maybe the video you could see on ChroniLyme Instagram,
Yes.
I realized one thing. They wanted to hear patients. Because all the people who were at this audition, I was the only patient, because all the other patients are unable to speak, just as I said. So I realized they wanted to hear me with my experience, because it was speaking to the heart, just like I said. And when you are a politician, you want to do something which is helpful, to be useful, I think. So I realized that, and I decided to do a diploma at the Sorbonne University of Medicine of the therapeutic education of patient to become an expert patient.
Okay, so let's pause there for a second. So you went back to the top university in France, and you decided that you were going to get an additional degree, more education, so that you could learn how to be a patient advocate.
I forgot to tell that I did another diploma to be a naturopath.
Okay, so a naturopath and a patient advocate. So you're going back and really getting yourself ready for the next phase of your life.
Yeah, and to get resources, because how to treat yourself, how to cure yourself, and how to understand the body, the disease, the condition of life condition too. It was important for me. So I went to the Sorbonne, and it was difficult for me. I must say it, to go disabled, to go.
You went to the top school in France. It's like going to Harvard in the U.S., right? You went to Sorbonne, which is an unbelievable accomplishment for anyone, especially someone who's managing a disease like Lyme disease. That's awesome.
But I wanted to go to the heart, because there is a huge woman at the head of the Sorbonne University of Medicine for the patient, and she is incredible. She worked with AIDS in the 80s, and I wanted to go there and to be with her and to be in the heart of that. When you decide to do something, I want to do it the best because it's a lot of energy. So I wanted to go there, and it was very, very interesting. And I met Laura because I discovered her book and discovered that we had so similar roads with the RV and Connecticut and so on.
Yes, you and Laura had very parallel journeys.
Yeah, and we were exactly the same. When we work together, we are so excited. It's so precise. We go quickly, and we agree on the way to do things, and it's very, very interesting, funny, and very friendly. So we decided to launch, to co-create preface with 5 expert patients. We're 6 now. And because we wanted to share that energy, to share the goals we had, and to facilitate the care partnership in France, and with the little goal to improve healthcare system. I know it's pretentious maybe, but I think you don't need to be 50 to do something. I saw that with ChroniLyme. You need to be 2, 3, 4 people highly motivated and having the same goal. You know, if you have one goal, you go and you manage to do it. That's the thing I learned in my career. You don't need to be numerous people. Just be yourself and just go.
And that's what you're doing. So you're running downhill and you're advocating for the doctors who want to do the good work in France. You're advocating for the 300,000 people who are invisible in the French medical system, the 60,000 people who are being diagnosed every year. And in some cases, unfortunately, you're advocating for people who can't speak for themselves anymore. I saw you put up a very powerful post on Instagram about the young woman who had actually committed suicide. The poor 22-year-old kid who unfortunately was in so much pain that took her life because of this. And it was important, of course, for everyone to know that this is a disease that must be studied further, and there must be more treatment available to people, or we're going to find more and more young people and older people, making that terrible choice.
We were devastated by this news. We have so many suicides in France too, and in Europe. And last year, my first patient in naturopathy was a woman with Lyme. So I decided to go with her, and she had been bitten by a tick in England, and then 2 months later she had 25 how do you say bee bites,
Bee stings.
yeah, 25. So she made an anaphylactic shock, and then she declined months after months. It was SLA, syndrome of Charcot, so it was terrible. And then she asked for euthanasia in Belgium, end of life.
Sorry.
So I came with her and I accompanied her until the end. So I'm always devastated when people do that. She didn't have choice because it was ended for her. But for every teenager, my girl thought about suicide too. So that's why I think I'm super active on the topic, because I was very lucky to meet my husband, who saved my life, and my doctor, and it was really the right doctor, because she's wonderful. She was very careful with me, and became such a friend. So I know all the patients don't have this kind of luck, So
I don't believe in luck. I think everything happens because it's supposed to happen, and I think it was supposed to happen that you were put in connection with somebody who could help you to take the steps that you needed to take in order to be able to recover enough so that you can now advocate for everyone else, both on the macro with the governmental level, and then on the micro, on the patient level, with the great work that you and Laura Arnell are doing. So let me ask you the final question, because you've been very kind with your time, and I was concerned when we first started talking about how long you'd be able to endure, because you thought maybe you only had an hour, and I just want you to know you've been with us now almost 2 hours. So you're doing fantastic. So thank you for for having the endurance that you have, and being willing to share so beautifully the way you've been sharing your story. But I'm going to ask you the final question we ask everybody on the Tick Bootcamp podcast. And this is something you have experience with after having been bitten by ticks on several occasions prior to going on this journey. If, God forbid, your daughter came into the room after the podcast and she had a tick biting her on her arm, what would you recommend that she do so that she wouldn't be reinfected and have to go through a more challenging Lyme disease journey?
To avoid ticks, that's it. That's what you want to say. I think that's not the primary problem, the essential issue. I think you have to. I think you have to have a good life condition. You have to eat well. You have to sleep well. You have to take care of your immune system. You have to take care of yourself when you have an emotional shock, when somebody dies, when you lose your job or something. You have to be very careful with you, because it's the moment your immune system goes down, and nobody says that. Believe in yourself, because you know your body well and better than the doctors. And don't believe the bad news. Because I see all the patients taking the bad news for granted, and the first hemiplegia I made, I visualized myself doing kayak, up, and I was sure I would walk again, and I'm sure I would walk again one day. So I think a diagnosis is not a holy thing. You don't take it for granted. You have to believe in yourself and make attention to your life condition.
Well, here at Tick Bootcamp, Ann, thank you enough for the great work that you're doing with all of the organizations that you're working with and all the advocacy work. We are huge fans of ChroniLyme and the great work you're doing there, and huge fans of the work that you and Laura Arnell are doing with Preface. So thank you so much for all the great work that you're doing in advocating for folks in the Lyme community.
Thanks for inviting me and for all the work you do. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to your Tick Bootcamp interview with our guest, Christèle Dumas-Gonnet. To our listeners, we have a call to action. First, if you'd like to learn more about ChroniLyme and Christèle, please visit her Instagram page at ChroniLyme. Second, if you enjoyed this episode of the Tick Bootcamp podcast, please share it with your friends by using the social media buttons you see at the bottom of our post. Third, we here at Tick Bootcamp have created a Tick by Blueprint. It has been inspired by the information that has been provided to us by past podcast guests. We urge you to visit our website at tickbootcamp.com to view your blueprint. Please note we would appreciate input or any improvements you would like to share. Fourth, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify to get your automatic episode updates of our Tick Bootcamp podcast. And finally, we thank you, our community, for your comments on our past podcast episodes. Please take a minute to leave us an honest review on Apple Podcasts, on Instagram, or on our website. We make it a point to read every single one of the reviews you are kind enough to leave us. Thank you, as always, for listening.